Revolutionary greetings to the Commander-in-Chief, officials of the EFF, commissars, fighters, and everyone watching this video today. I would like to welcome you to the EFF Women's Month series, where we are having conversations with various women from various sectors, with the intention of us having conversations and understanding the challenges that they have. We know that in South Africa, sex work is criminalized. It is considered a crime. It is considered a crime by national legislation, but also at the same time, when most of sex workers are arrested, it is usually municipal bylaws that are used. As the EFF will say that sex work is work, and we are actually advocating and helping those that are advocating for this to actually be realized.
We are not here to play. We are not here to play games. We are not here to have fun with the SARS. We want answers from SARS. To tell us what happened to them. We are tired of police brutality. We are tired of police harassment. We are tired of law enforcement.
My name is Nosipho Vidima. I am a sex worker, not a sexual woman. And I sit in a few structures of the sex worker movement. Here at the Sex Workers Education and Advocacy Task Force, I am the programs manager. I am a Sisonke member, which Sisonke is the sex worker movement of South Africa. It is national. I am part of the convening team for the Queer Feminist Film Festival. I'm a member of ASIJIGI, Coalition for Sex Workers. A member of Total Shutdown. Basically, I'm a gender activist. I would say that I'm a strong believer in women's movements and feminist movements, and social justice as a whole. I did not start here, and the first step, this is why I always count sex worker, because I'm a sex worker. And that's where my journey started.
Most of those people would tell you that selling sex is degrading, that no one would ever choose to do it, that it's dangerous, women get abused and killed. In fact, most of those people would say there should be a law against it. And maybe that sounds reasonable to you. It sounded reasonable to me until the closing months of 2009, when I was working 2 dead-end minimum wage jobs. Every month my wages would just replenish my overdraft. I was exhausted and my life was going nowhere. Like many others before me, I decided sex for money was a better option.
I started being a sex worker around the year 2008. And it was really a decision of putting food on top of the table and also to pay for my studies. I'm from Durban. I started in Durban Morningside, and it was a conscious decision because I had been a waitress before that I'm not going to name the institution, but one of the restaurants that pay and have been known to pay very little wages for their waitresses, on top of not registering them as permanent workers. You can work there for 4 years and still be a temp, and you just never get registered. So what would happen is that because you also work into the night, transport gets very, very hard to find to go back to the township. And because of that, we had found a security company. And one of those guys was like, at this time, I actually go towards Inanda. So I can be able to transport you because I also transport other nurses. And he did not say this, who's this other sisters? He was like, no, I just want Abanyosis. Okay, we're going to join this Abosisi and actually be transported home because it was very hard to find transports. Turns out the guy was actually transporting sex workers when they come back from their own shift, from Morningside. And the sex workers would then get into the car, and sometimes they would count their money as we're paying our 20 rand to get to the township. And these people were counting a lot of money. Serious bills. They were counting more money than my salary. And this was maybe on a Friday or Saturday. I'm like, I was actually asked these people what's going on. So I made a conscious decision, and by conscious decision, I mean exactly that. Where one would say, why not waitressing? Why not domestic work?
Yes.
Why not? No, I needed more money. I had a son that was growing up without a father, a single mother, who was also in a private school because I'm trying to get the best education that I possibly can. And I was also studying. I was starting to go back to my studies as well. I needed to save up for that. So I started my sex work journey. At first, it was almost easy and very exciting because I thought there's a lot of money. The clients are not all bad, although you get horrible clients then and there. You know, it wasn't that bad. But somewhere, I would say 2010, somewhere in 2010, apparently the local units, which is law enforcement, and the SAPS were tasked with cleaning the streets. So when they clean the street, the first thing that they go to, because of vulnerability, because they know nobody's going to protect, it's going to be sex workers. If it's not at night with sex workers, it's going to be street vendors who are not registered. You know, local units are there to clean the street. So
and it's always vulnerable.
It's always yes. So at that time, there was a lot of harassment with police. First of all, I had been raped by police before they started cleaning the streets. So I was really just disheartened by police at that time, and law enforcement and the power that they actually have, because I had also realized that you can't exactly lay a charge against somebody. So when they started cleaning the streets, there was a lot of harassment. This means physical beatings, pepper sprayings, driving around with you for hours. They would even drop off other people, like after driving around long hours with them, naked on the street to make them walk back to wherever they had found them. There was also corruption in the fact that they would actually ask for monies as well. So at that point in time, I got arrested. And it's not linked to Sexual Offences Act. It's actually written as a bylaw. So public nuisance, those kind of things, petty crimes. And in Durban, they had a kind of a sentencing that is, I'm still yet to understand how we were really sentenced, because under the Sexual Offences Act, they can't arrest you unless you are caught in the act with money in your hand, known to be transacting in sex, for them to actually prove that you are a sex worker.
The first approach is full criminalization. Half the world, including Russia, South Africa, and most of the US, regulate sex work by criminalizing everyone involved. So that's seller, buyer, and third parties. Lawmakers in these countries apparently hope that the fear of getting arrested will deter people from selling sex. But if you're forced to choose between obeying the law and feeding yourself or your family, you're going to do the work anyway and take the risk. Criminalization is a trap. It's hard to get a conventional job when you have a criminal record. Potential employers won't hire you. Assuming you still need money, you'll stay in the more flexible, informal economy. The law forces you to keep selling sex, which is the exact opposite of its intended effect.
There was a woman who was older in the industry, older to us and older in the industry, who really had taken in this kind of initiative of taking care of all the younger ones who had come. So she knew that there was nobody except my family that she could go, and my siblings at the time already knew that I was doing sex work, who could get me out. So she went and she told them that this person is not coming back home because they have been arrested. Yes. And they were able to pay for my fine. And I was back to the streets again. At that time, we never know what it means to actually roll your thumb when you're at the police station or when you're in court. I didn't think there was going to be a criminal record. I didn't think it's going to affect me later in life. Fast forward, I got raped again by a police officer somewhere in between 2011 and 2012. And at that time, I knew that I was done with police officers abusing me. And when Sisonke had established their offices, I joined the movement and I started attending spaces. But also, I was there to mobilize and say, if there needs to be public demonstration of this, it's going to happen, and I'm going to make sure that as sex workers that work in a certain area, we're going to go there because we are tired of police abusing us. And in 2012, we took to the streets, led by Sisonke. And let's say it didn't really necessarily change how we were treated by police officers. It didn't change the abuse, but at least we had a voice. And we had handed over our memorandum. Yes. Yes. And things have not changed. It's 2020 and you still getting the same kind of cases where police officers are the violators, the most violating people towards sex workers. Yes, clients now and here you will get reports of clients that have abused somebody, but most of the time it's police officers and nobody really knows what to do. And a case like that this year for us that really is still confusing to us and we're not really understanding is the case of Robin.
Being criminalized leaves you exposed to mistreatment by the state itself. In many places, you may be coerced into paying a bribe or even into having sex with a police officer to avoid arrest. Police and prison guards in Cambodia, for example, have been documented subjecting sex workers to what can only be described as torture: threats at gunpoint, beatings, electric shocks, rape, and denial of food. Another worrying thing, if you're selling sex in places like Kenya, South Africa, or New York, a police officer can arrest you if you're caught carrying condoms, because condoms can legally be used as evidence that you're selling sex. Obviously, this increases HIV risk. Imagine knowing that if you're busted carrying condoms, it'll be used against you. It's a pretty strong incentive to leave them at home, right? Sex workers working in these places are forced to make a tough choice between risking arrest or having risky sex. What would you choose?
When the hard lockdown started, the first 21 days, the local government had decided that they're going to take everybody that was unhomed and put them into a shelter, but it wasn't really a shelter, it was a camp. It was a concentration camp.
I remember the conditions because a lot of people were enraged by that camp. They wouldn't even allow people in because I know that every once in a while send councillors of the EFF to check what exactly is happening. And you looked at how much money was being spent there, or they claimed that they were spending there on a monthly basis versus what people were eating, the conditions that people found themselves in. And I know that a lot of homeless people actually felt that this is far worse than where you actually took me from. And you are saying that you're coming to come and isolate me and protect me from this pandemic or this virus. And at the time, videos of Italy were all over the place, and you thought that all of us were going to die in Vietnam. So I can imagine what they were going through, all homeless people. But I remember that
some of them actually were even walked out of there. We had stories where people walked from Strandfontein. They were like, no, walked back to Observatory.
Wow.
Yes. But I think when we're talking about the Robin specifically, Robin had been in activists for a very long time. They were the first people that we had when we had the lesbian group here at Sweat to access the queer space, right? And they were part of the recruiters realizing that, this one is also part of the LGBTI, or part specifically women, although they might be lesbian, bisexual, or queer, or trans women. They need a certain space, and they would mobilize and get these people so that we can have focus groups where we kind of unpack things and talk about realities from them. So along came Strandfontein, and there was Robin again saying, I don't believe that this is actually right. Nobody can force me to go to a shelter when I am choosing to stay where I know where I have built a home for myself. It might be outside, but it's a home. And Robin was very vocal. There's a video that was captured by one of the human rights officers that come from the Human Rights Resource Center that were actually monitoring the situation in Strandfontein. And Robin was just refusing because the police had stopped him and said, but why are you not in Strandfontein and why are you not getting into buses? And Robin was just telling them that I'm not going to be taken away from what I've built as a home, and I do not necessarily trust what's that situation going to be like when so many people are going and we are told that this pandemic needs you to be literal. I don't understand how are you protecting us when you get there. And that's the first video, and we would take it that she was actually there profiled. You know, when you're vocal, the police don't necessarily like you. It's almost it's disturbance to their state-given power.
And I mean, when you deal with the most vocal person, then whoever might get mobilized by that person will then get demobilized, because I mean, if you deal with the head, everything else. I mean, that's a tactic they used in Fismas Fall as well, when they target leaders and they just also do mass arrests and coup arrests. And after a while, the momentum then go down because people are scared, and also because there were no consequences for the harassment and the brutality of the police. So you are going to say and fight, but the state and everyone that is watching you being victimized does not come to that point. And I feel like South African police generally, authorities have been given so much power, and because they know that there aren't going to be any consequences, they do as they feel like.
So they took her on the 9th of April, and it's a small, very small police station.
Yeah, no, I've seen
it's a very small police station. So if her friends would actually pass there, they're able to shout, Robin, are you okay? What's going on inside? This is the 9th, this is the 10th, this is the 11th. On the 11th, her partner asked, are you okay? She said no, she wasn't feeling well.
Comrades! When I'm standing here today, the inside bleeds. Yes. Because we died inside this police station. No one knows what is going on. We want answers! We want answers! We have come here. This is the 3rd March. No answers.
On the 12th, they are all told that she had hanged herself. I don't know, South African police stations almost have the same structure. I myself have actually been in a police cell. I'm wondering how did she hang herself? Where would she hang? The roof is very, very far. And if she did it by the windows, that is also far. But also, how with the blankets in a police cell that doesn't have a stool for you to stand on, so that you can hang yourself and then kick it, you know? All of these questions started going into our heads, and then we were like, no, we're going to report this. So we reported it to Chapter 9 institutions. We have not gotten outcomes yet, but we're waiting for them. This is not a case of a first for us when it comes to police. Police have raped, police have murdered and done things to sex workers, and all of it goes unjustice. It goes unjustice. In the I think it was in Mpumalanga. In Mpumalanga, there was a time where police would make people walk naked in front of taxi drivers. They would come to their homes, strip them, make them strip, and with the van behind them, make them walk from their homes to the police to the taxi rank naked to shame them. And when we tried to come in and intervene, like you say, we were told to put an inquiry through IPID.
I know, they always say IPID never does anything.
And it didn't do anything till today. All they did was have a small little meeting where they said they're going to put an inquiry into the police station and the police actions of those at that police station. And then that's it. It went away like that. And people had been not only made to walk to the police station, to the taxi rank, they had been brutally abused, some of them beaten up. Their homes had been damaged because police would come into their homes, they would meet the sex workers and they provide them. And they would hit furniture, throw on the floor their groceries while they beating them up.
People that
Yes.
are in the, because some of these women are mothers.
Yes.
So,
Yes. It's always like this. Whenever we talk about police, for us, it's a place of torture, it's a place of trauma. But then, I over the years, we started a campaign which was to actually just highlight these violences. And one of those campaigns is Say Her Name campaign. It does research. I coordinated it for the past 5 years. It does research and monitoring and following up on cases of sex workers that have been killed. And in the past 2 years, we have 101 sex workers that have died, and we're also talking women only. When we say women in the language of Sisonke,
yes.
it means cishet women, it means transgender women. And out of that 101, more than 50% of that is actually through brutality, it's through gender-based violence, it's through people that pretend to be clients because they know this is a vulnerable group, and that's their first attack, place of attack, because they know they're going to pick up a sex worker, rape her, and dump her, and nobody's going to come back and actually ask
and
them
also
anything.
that sex worker can't go to the police station.
The sex worker, if she does survive, she'll never go to the police station, because at the police station she's going to be told you were looking for it. And in these 5 years that we've had this campaign, we have not had a lot of justice. A lot of cases keep on falling off the court system. Some of it we are told that there's not enough evidence, and some of it we are told many little things, man. It would be the forensic unit has not gotten back to us with the evidence that was handed in to actually help us identify who this person was that did this. But to us, it's just another yet a failure to women. It's another yet a failure to women in the sex work industry by government and by the departments that actually are supposed to be protecting us.
The prohibition of street prostitution also causes more harm than it prevents. Firstly, to avoid getting arrested, street workers take risks to avoid detection. That means working alone or in isolated locations like dark forests where they're vulnerable to attack. If you're caught selling sex outdoors, you pay a fine. How do you pay that fine without going back to the streets? It was the need for money that saw you on the streets in the first place. And so the fines stack up, and you're caught in a vicious cycle of selling sex to pay the fines you got for selling sex.
So, to protect ourselves or to protect our community, because you'll see that within the organization itself, it's sex workers that work here, mostly, and then there's the Sisonke sex workers movement. We have a national hotline. It's 24 hours, 365 days a year. It's actually up here. And through the helpline, it's also run by a sex worker who's migrant. And she has done auxiliary counseling to be able to contain trauma when people call, because people call and they faced things. They faced rape, they faced beatings, they faced police brutality that we're talking about, they faced community stigma, which extends to sometimes violations of their homes, violations to their children. There's
rejection
by family as well, and health care things. It's being stigmatized by healthcare workers. It's being not given sexual reproductive health services because you are no more a sex worker. They're trying to save you. Healthcare workers. It's numerous things that happen to sex workers. It's not just contained into the sex work space, but it extends. When people find out that you're a sex worker, they will come to your home, they will harass you. So she deals with things like that. So she's done a trauma counseling skills and runs the national helpline which refers, we also work closely with partner organizations across the country that can assist when we can't assist because we are based here in Cape Town. And through the Sisonke National Movement, networks have built. There's cells, if I should say cells, with people, with sex workers that are more vocal, more active, more out there, taking up the space of being ambassadors, sort of, where if the person cannot reach us on the helpline, they go to this person and report, this has happened to me. And from there, the ambassador will report back to us, and then we take it there. There's also another program that specifically deals with what I was talking about. When I talk about it, extended to our own our own spaces, which is our homes, and it's called Mother for the Future.
Oh, yes.
This one specifically talks to mothers, single mothers that are doing sex work, and it speaks to the children of sex workers who are affected by stigma, who often get affected by stigma that is directed to their mothers, and then trickles down to them, where they can be discriminated in school, for instance. We've had cases like that. But also Mother for the Future provides a space where all the sex workers have volunteered themselves in some provinces to actually take care of children of sex workers while their mothers go into sex work. Because we would find that if you're a single mother, you've got 2 kids, and there's nobody else that's staying with you, and you need to go into sex work. If you ask your neighbor, if your neighbor ends up finding out that you're a sex worker, then they start charging you.
Oh wow!
They start charging you to a point where it's not just normal charging or babysitting; it's exploitation.
Yeah,
because I know you're a sex worker. I've actually noticed this whole thing, this movement that's going on in your house, and now I know you're a sex worker. So it's almost like a kind of
a threat.
Yes. If you do not give me more money, or if I'm coming to ask for things from you and you're not giving me, I'm almost going to spill this out to the rest of the community. So all the sex workers were like, no, it's okay. If you want your kid to be taken care of, we'll take care of your kid while you're going to sex work. You just make sure that the kid is taken care of, school fees, food, any essentials that they might possibly need. But you find that sometimes it's really hard because sometimes sex workers don't make money. Sometimes they are arrested over weekends and they're not able to actually provide that, which is why sometimes you find that Mothers for the Future does fundraisers for these spaces that have been created for children to stay while their mothers are working. We've also got other extended services and networks for sex workers through the outreach program, which happens in the Western Cape, Gauteng, Western Northwest, Eastern Cape, did I count it? KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo. It's Swet and Sisonke that do outreach programs, which means going out to the street and meeting sex workers in their hotspots, giving them educational material on health, on human rights, and any other social issues, linking them up to care if they need care, whether it's psychosocial care, psychological care, health care, or any other things that they might actually need, and also giving up them condoms at the same time. In these provinces that I've counted also, we have what we call creative spaces, where we meet once a month. Sex workers come into a space and we talk about issues that are affecting us, we find solutions together, and it's sort of a space that's safe for us. There's also other groups, other smaller groups like political groups, like the feminist political space. We've got the trans space where they find safety for themselves in each province.
People selling sex often don't have other options for income. If you need that money, the only effect that a drop in business is going to have is to force you to lower your prices or offer more risky sexual services. If you need to find more clients, you might seek the help of a manager. And so you see, rather than putting a stop to what's often described as pimping, a law like this actually gives oxygen to potentially abusive third parties. To keep safe in my work, I try not to take bookings from someone who calls me from a withheld number. If it's a home or a hotel visit, I try to get a full name and details. If I worked under the Swedish model, a client would be too scared to give me that information. I might have no other choice but to accept a booking from a man who is untraceable if he later turns out to be violent. If you need their money, you need to protect your clients from the police. If you work outdoors, that means working alone or in isolated locations, just as if you were criminalized yourself. It might mean getting into cars quicker. Less negotiating time means snap decisions. Is this guy dangerous or just nervous? Can you afford to take the risk? Can you afford not to?
I think the biggest mistake that people have when they think about sex workers is that we are a homogeneous group. It's one set of a kind of individual. Because I think it also comes with the stereotype that society gives us, where they're expecting you just because you're a sex worker, you must have done drugs, you must have done alcohol, you must have been raped, you must have been trafficked, which is all lies. You find that a lot of sex workers are actually independent sex workers who do not even have a pimp. They are here, they are doing their work, they are providing for yes. But society has put us in this stereotypical person. They've painted a person for themselves, not realizing that we still are individuals like everybody else. And this is why it wouldn't work as asking for skills. I know my career choice. It's through the legal fraternity. Somebody else wants to be a social worker. Somebody else wants to be a nurse. Somebody else wants to be an engineer. How is government going to make sure that there's so much of a fund to fund all of these studies? Somebody else wants to be a doctor. We are not out here trying to have small dreams also. Nobody's going to say that I want to be a waitress, I want to make bidding. Because with bidding, there have been organizations that have tried bidding for sex workers. They're like, no, we're going to give you skills, but that's the years of bidding.
It's looking like all attempts to control or prevent sex work from happening make things more dangerous for people selling sex. Fear of law enforcement makes them work alone in isolated locations and allows clients and even cops to get abusive in the knowledge they'll get away with it. Fines and criminal records force people to keep selling sex rather than enabling them to stop. Crackdowns on buyers drive sellers to take dangerous risks and into the arms of potentially abusive managers. These laws also reinforce stigma and hatred against sex workers.
When we talk about free education, Tina, us, sex workers in this country, we were there. When people were fighting for fees must fall, we were there. We marched because we fully understand also that although there is sex work and we're saying sex work is work, you don't want your kid to have very limited choices in life to begin with. We want our kids to have better education. Some of us still want an education also. So we went into the streets.
We thought that in 2017, South Africa is going to have free education.
But no.
Yeah. And I mean, that's another thing as well, that why do you then, when I say that I want to be a sex worker, do you now all of a sudden give me this guiding bundle, start and advocate for this, advocate for that? But there's people that are advocating for this things. And there's also we're dealing with a government that is not responsive to anyone for that matter, because I know that fees must fall, for instance, starting from 2015 until 2017. To this day, you have people that have been suspended, you have people that have been expelled, you have people that have criminal records. And this free education that we're told about is not there, because you must still go every year to NSFAS and perform about how poor you are. Sometimes you even get like your funding a couple April and March. Now for the past 2 years, I'll get my fund in March, April, that time school started in February, you know. So there's all these challenges as well, and what you think when there's a solution is not necessarily a solution. And also just trying to erase people's agency as well. Because if a person says, I want to do this and I can't do it, but why do you not consider that? It also speaks to them.
Firstly, sex work is and always has been a survival strategy for all kinds of unpopular minority groups. People of colour, migrants, people with disabilities, LGBTQ people, particularly trans women. These are the groups most heavily profiled and punished through prohibitionist law. I don't think this is an accident. These laws have political support precisely because they target people that voters don't want to see or know about. Sex workers are real people. We've had complicated experiences, and complicated responses to those experiences. But our demands are not complicated. You can ask expensive escorts in New York City, brothel workers in Cambodia, street workers in South Africa, and every girl on the roster at my old job in Soho, and they will all tell you the same thing. You can speak to millions of sex workers and countless sex worker-led organizations. We want full decriminalization and labor rights as workers. I'm just one sex worker on the stage today, but I'm bringing a message from all over the world.
You have South Africa, which prides itself as having one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. But at the same time, the very same South Africa has oppressive laws that violate the very same constitutional rights or the very same human rights of the very same people that it is supposed to protect. On one hand, you have South Africa that moves from country to country globally, sitting in very important global platforms, claiming and pretending to be an advocate for human rights, pretending to be an advocate for gender equality. But that very same South African government, when we as women and when we as people of sexual minorities as well, come and we say to the government that we are dying, that we cannot breathe, that we need to be saved. And not only that, but we actually give them proposals and petitions on how they could actually save us. Those cries and those demands and those proposals will always fall on deaf ears. And that is the same with the call for decriminalization of sex, as the EFF will say that sex work is work, and we are actually advocating and helping those that are advocating for this to actually be realized.
We really need political commitment here. We need commitment to decriminalize sex work, and we need commitment for funding of the plan to go forward.
Asina male,